In a world where everything, information, food, our ability to communicate, all these things are literally at our fingertips, patience has become this forgotten virtue. Isn't it true? Why wait when we can get it right now? We love instant, but nothing worthwhile was ever instant. The things that matter in our lives should hold more gravity than a pudding or microwave noodles. It's important for us to recognize and understand the power and importance of patience, because growth in our lives is a process, and process takes time. Now, last week, Wayne made the statement that the world that we live in desperately needs more mature Jesus followers, and I couldn't agree with him more. The truth is that when we are and have more mature Jesus followers, it would mean that we would respond differently in moments where offense may want to creep in. We'll respond differently to the needs of the world around us, the brokenness that we engage with day in and day out. He also said that growth happens as a result of resistance. That it's in the resistance that we build a muscle, and the same happens with regards to growing our faith. Now, question time for you and for me. Have you ever felt like your world was turned upside down, leaving you uncertain about the future? Wondering why you have to go through tough times, why you have to go through unpleasant things and possibly even very painful things. Well, over the past few weeks, we've been speaking about the things that God uses to grow our faith. Things like private disciplines, providential relationships, and personal ministry. And this week, I'd like to share the fourth thing that God uses to grow our faith. And it's something that has been crucial in my life personally. And that is pivotal circumstances. Now, whether it's a birth, a breakup, or a broken leg, these circumstances are what God uses to grow our faith. Every faith story involves events or circumstances that are viewed as pivotal. A pivotal circumstance is a significant life event or situation that has the potential to profoundly impact a person's life and even their faith journey. Now, some of you are watching right now because of a pivotal circumstance. Something happened to re-engage you with either church or your faith or God. Some of these things are positive. It'll be, maybe it was the birth of a child, or maybe it was that you fell in love with a person of faith and they kind of got you re-engaged. Good things can melt disbelief. They can erase cynicism. But that's not usually the case. Now, whether you are a person of faith or you regard yourself as a skeptic, I think we can all agree that times of peace and prosperity and health, these do not create a sense of need. They lure us into thinking that we're fine without God. Faith is not generally developed in peaceful waters. Most of the time, the events or the circumstances are negative, such as the loss of a loved one, or an illness, or financial hardship. The key aspect of pivotal circumstance is that they challenge individuals to reflect on their beliefs, their values, and priorities, often leading to a deeper understanding of themselves and their relationship with God. In the context of spiritual growth, pivotal circumstance can be seen as opportunities for God to work in someone's life, fostering growth, reliance on God and in faith in Him, and a stronger sense of purpose. Now, in August 2006, I was one of 8 motorcyclists who left Cabo da Roca just outside Lisbon, Portugal, on an epic adventure to deliver biker Bibles into Russia. We traveled through Portugal, Spain, France, Belgium, Germany, Poland, then Belarus, and finally into Russia. Now, the truth be told, we were spending between 12 and 16 hours a day on the motorcycle. And this was purely because we had certain deadlines that we had to meet. About 3 hours southeast of Moscow, in rural Russia, one of the guys behind me lost concentration at a stop that we'd come to and that he didn't. As a result, he hit me directly on the left leg from behind with a pretty brisk pace and broke my leg on impact. I can remember falling over on the road with the most intense pain shooting through my leg. I instantly knew that my leg was broken because I could actually feel the bones grinding against each other. It would take about 4 hours for us to find a hospital with an x-ray machine and a doctor who could actually operate on me. Now, at this point, I need to say that the guy who rode into me was a dear friend of mine. I love him to death to this day. Don't blame him for what happened. And still, as I say, love him to death. But this was a pretty hardcore situation that I found myself in. I mean, before wheeling me into theater, they made me sign all kinds of forms in Russian. I had absolutely no idea what I was signing. I can remember waking up from surgery, looking down and just being so grateful that I still had 2 legs. The pain was like no other pain I'd ever felt before. When I did look down and there were 2 legs, I realized that I had this old school external fixator on my leg, like this cage wrapped around my leg with 24 pins inserted into the tibia bone of my left leg. I spent a week in a very rural hospital where there was no bedding or food. I can remember between my dad and our interpreter, they had to go and buy me food across the road at a little street cafe. I spent 3 months in a wheelchair. I was on crutches for a year and went through 7 surgeries in those 3 years. After year 1, there was still no union of the bone, and the doctor spent the next 2 years trying different methods to stimulate growth and spoke to me very often about the possibility of amputation. Now, the accident happened a little more than 3 months before our wedding day. So ladies, if you're watching, you will know the panic that would be going through you right now. But I essentially can remember getting out of the wheelchair and having 2 weeks to learn how to walk with a cane. As a result, I wore top hats and tails just so that I could look the part on the day and walk with that cane with it making sense in the photos. I can remember in our wedding photos, my wife is always walking ahead of me, and it looks like she's dragging me out of the church and ready to lead this marriage from day one. But that's not my wife's heart, and I'm so grateful for that. And she was my biggest help and support through those 3 really, really tough years. Now, to go back to the moment of impact, and me crashing to the ground in agony. From a motorcycle racing experience, I'd seen guys with this sort of injury seem so okay in the track medic room, only to hear a couple of hours later that marrow had got into their bloodstream and that they died as a result. In other cases, I'd seen people die from seemingly minor incidents and accidents as a result of shock. Them just allowing their minds to run rampant in the moment to the point that their system would just start shutting down. So I found myself at 25 years old, lying on a road in Russia, faced with my own mortality. Was this it? Was this the end? And it was at this point that I sensed this little voice inside of me just ask me a very pertinent question. At church on Sundays at that time, we were singing a song called Salvation is Here. And I just sensed this little voice ask me this. Every week you sing, salvation is here. But what do you believe now? Right here, right now, on a road in Russia, in some pretty deep trouble. What do you believe now? And I believe that C.S. Lewis put it so beautifully in his book, The Problem of Pain, when he said this. He said, God whispers to us in our pleasures. He speaks in our circumstances, but he shouts in our pains. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. And that was definitely true for me. What I would come to discover over the next 3 years of my life was that God would use my circumstances to turn my heart to him. I would learn that the notion that God doesn't allow bad things to happen, that it's a lie. But more importantly, I learned that God is present, that he's available, that he's deeply caring through those bad things. During this pivotal time of my life and through these circumstances, I started to lean heavily on my private disciplines as Paul spoke into in week 1. I spent a lot of time in the writings of David. I couldn't help but read his journal in the Psalms and gain this sense that he often put into words what I was feeling, that he told God what I wanted to tell God. And as David writes in Psalm 13, he's ultimately, again, on the run from Saul, and his life is under threat. And this was something that we saw David go through quite a bit. And Saul's pursuit of David's life would become a pivotal circumstance in David's life. And facing this, David writes this. He says, "O Lord, how long will you forget me? Forever? How long will you look the other way?" I wonder, as you hear those words, does that feel familiar? Does that feel like something you've been going through? Maybe you're using very similar words to these right now. David carries on and he says, "How long must I struggle with anguish in my soul, with sorrow in my heart every day? How long will my enemies have the upper hand?" Turn and answer me, O Lord my God. Restore the sparkle to my eye, or I will die. Don't let my enemies gloat, saying, "We have defeated him." Don't let them rejoice at my downfall. And as I read these words of David, I understand that David is so sober-minded about where he's at. He has clarity on what he's facing. And again, maybe you find yourself in a similar space where you feel like, man, I have clarity over where I'm at and what I'm facing. With these pivotal circumstances, I am very well aware of them. But at the same time, this is also where David pivots, where he brings God into the picture. As he says this, he says, but I trust in your unfailing love. I will rejoice because you have rescued me. I will sing to the Lord because he is good to me. You see, what David so beautifully demonstrates here for us is that pivotal circumstances introduce God into the conversation and into our very lives. They make us reconsider what it is we've put our faith in. They make us reconsider who's in control. They create a healthy sense of dependence on God. So as I consider those things in my life, is my faith in a system or a currency or a political party or an achievement, one of my achievements, or in my ability, or is my trust and my faith in God? Have I got the right person behind the controls? Am I completely dependent on God? Do I trust him in these moments? See, our responses make all the difference. The right responses leaves us open to receive God's grace. The wrong responses forces us to face life without God. And as Philip Yancey put it, he said, the only thing worse than disappointment with God is disappointment without God. See, what God is demonstrating to us through David's story is that God is not absent in the upheaval. God is not silent or absent. He's actually very present. That our pain is not for nothing. It's not for free. But that he can and will use our circumstances and our pain to build a bigger faith in us if we'll let him. I believe that David's complete story shows us that if it feels like God is doing something to us, that's when he is doing something in us. That's when our faith gets bigger. And I know, as I consider my own story, that on that road in Russia, I had a choice to make. I could succumb to my circumstances. That was one of the options. I could let the fear of the future dominate my mind, or I could recognize that salvation is here. I could recognize that salvation isn't just this thing that God saves me for an afterlife, but I could recognize that God saves me for life right here, right now. That in that moment and in every moment to follow, God would be there with me. That he is in control and that he is trustworthy. In the midst of uncertainty, God invites you and me. He invites us to trust him, knowing that he's in control. You see, my wife and I would go and we would face far bigger broken legs in our lives. We'd face major health challenges. We'd face the loss of dear loved ones. We'd face the great 10-year fertility struggle. We'd face the breakdown and loss of relationships that would have absolutely life-altering effects. We'd have to face walking family through cancer. But here's what he did in that process. You see, he taught us to trust him with a broken leg so that later we would trust him with our broken hearts. And maybe that rings true for you today. You see, it was Jesus' brother, James, who said this. He said, "Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing." And now I know that as I read that to you, I know that these moments are hard and that these words that I've just said can seem even harder, depending on where you are in your own personal journey at the moment, depending on how raw things are for you right now. But what James is saying to us is that if we can understand and embrace these pivotal circumstances, we can better navigate this life as we better navigate our faith journey. See, think about something that you've been facing. Think about personal, pivotal moments in your life. Maybe you've gone through them, or maybe you're in them right now. Maybe if you've been through them, looking back, just take a moment and stop and see, can I recognize God working in that? Can I see God in there somewhere? That what you're facing right now, stop and take a moment. Can I see God working on my behalf right now? I so want to encourage you to take time to find His heart for you as you search Scripture. Now, ask Him to give you something that speaks to your situation, and then just focus on that every day and allow that to speak into that circumstance for you. I want to encourage you to ask God to show you His hand. See, when we can spot God in it, something happens to our faith. Something dramatic happens to our faith. And this morning, as you've prepared yourself for communion, and if you haven't yet, you're welcome to just hit pause. We'll be here when you come back. Go grab your elements, and we'd love to do communion together. But as we step into communion right now, I believe that as I spoke about us just asking God to show us His hand in what we're going through right now, I believe that as we look at communion, it's the hands of Jesus that speak to us of the fact that we can trust Him. That the scars and the wounds in His hands speak of the fact that we can trust Him. And as we, this morning, in this moment, wherever you are, as we consider the bread and what it represents, where Jesus says, "This is my body that is broken for you." That His body was broken for exactly what you're going through right now. That it's in His brokenness that we find wholeness, that we find peace, that it's in the scars of the hands of Jesus that we can know that we can trust Him. And so this morning, or afternoon or evening, wherever you are, as you eat with me as we say, "Lord, I thank you that you are with me in what I'm going through. And I thank you that as I remember your cross and as I remember your scars, I can remember that I can trust you. And as we take the cup, as his blood was shed for us, for the forgiveness of our sins, for the healing of our bodies, that again we can drink in remembrance, and that we can remember that in this moment, that he is with us, and that no matter what we're going through, we can trust him. So Lord, as we drink, we thank you that you are trustworthy. We give you our circumstances, and we say, Lord, I trust you. I want to repeat the words of David, and I hope that they can echo into your life and that you can echo them for yourself. Where he said, but I trust in your unfailing love. I will rejoice because you have rescued me. I will sing to the Lord because he is good to me. You see, without seeing God's hand in our pivotal circumstances, it's not hard for us to become bitter or resentful, or even risk being disillusioned with our own faith. We may be overwhelmed by fear and anxiety, missing the opportunity to grow in our faith and experience his presence. But I believe that recognizing his presence, recognizing that he is here with me right now, no matter what I'm going through, that I can trust him, that it helps us to trust him more deeply. So, let's trust God in our pivotal circumstances and allow him to grow our faith. Remember, he's not doing something to us. He's doing something in us. Let's pray and ask God to show his hand day in and day out, knowing that the hands of Jesus show the marks that say that we can trust him, that he is trustworthy. When we can spot God in it, something drastic happens to our faith, and that is my prayer for you. We love and appreciate you. We look forward to seeing you next week.